Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, welcome to another special episode of Full Circle, the podcast. I am your host, Charles Tyson Jr. Martha is off doing fabulous Martha things at the moment and can't join us, but she sends our love. But that is okay because I am sitting here with a wonderful guest. He is an author of a fabulous and thrilling new book called The Dead of Summer. And I am very excited to talk to him about it and its themes and all the wonderful things contained within the brightly colored covers. Ryan La Scala is in the house. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being had by me. So, this is a great book. I inhaled it pretty quickly. And so it was pitched to me as a queer young adult horror novel. For one thing, please explain to me, like, what do you think defines a young adult novel?
So you could take this from a few different angles. From like the industrial angle, it's a marketing category. So it's books that publishers publish for teenagers, right? Basically for high schoolers and market to high schoolers. But like in reality, which is where I read and write from, everybody reads YA stories. Like
Right.
the whole world is obsessed with books about um, teenagers doing heroic and difficult things. And so, yeah, YA is sort of like it tells itself that it's going to be sold to like teenagers, but the fact of the matter is that YA stories just center teen experiences and teen characters, but many people, older and younger, read those stories.
Okay, good. That makes sense. Cause I'm reading it cause, I think of YA novels. I think of like that, Boy Wizard series that I'm not going to name drop, which feels pretty like childish, as much as I may or may
Right.
not have enjoyed it. And this definitely is not that. It's a lot of fun, actually. So tell us a little bit about what The Dead of Summer is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if anyone's familiar with my work, I focus on horror stories, but within the genre of horror, you can do a lot of different things. So none of my stories are too similar. This is definitely sort of my most ambitious and biggest story. It's the first of two books. The
Nice.
second one's coming out next year. I just turned it in. So this one ends on a very big cliffhanger. I've been getting a lot of messages about, but rest assured, the rest of the story is on its way. But in this story, you're gonna encounter the island of Anchor's Mercy, which is it's a fictional place, but it's this beautiful island off the coast of Maine, famous for its shellfish and its beaches, and it's like a summer destination for a lot of queer people. There's like a vibrant drag community there, but it's hiding a very insidious secret. And Ollie, the main character, is a teenager determined to figure out what that secret is because all of his life as a resident on this island, he has been noticing patterns of secrecy and shame and sickness. And now his mom is sick, and he wants to figure out what exactly is sort of causing this. Like, what aren't the adults telling everybody? But before he can really get too far in his investigation, there's this storm on the busiest weekend of the summer, and up from the ocean washes basically answers, but they take the form of this kind of radiant supernatural organism that begins to spread itself through the community. And now it's up to Ollie to figure out how all of these things are connected while trying to kind of stop it from escaping onto the mainland. And so that's one side of the story. The other is a scientific researcher who is 3 weeks in the future writing about their investigation into Ollie's story because they think somewhere in Ollie's fight to survive is the solution to potentially saving the rest of the world from a similar fate. So it's kind of unclear what happens to Ollie. That's kind of the big point of the book, but yeah, that's the gist of it.
Yeah, that is it in a nutshell. The storm comes and then wackiness ensues.
Very wacky, yeah.
And I love I love the themes of, how a secret can basically devour, an individual, a community,
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
location, even. Which, when you tie it into the queerness of the story, has layers. I appreciated that. I also appreciated because the location of the story is like this gay hub, this like that's detached from everyone else because it's an island. The queerness can exist on its own without having to, be held up in like, look, queer people.
Hmm.
It can just
Hmm.
exist as part of the story. I definitely appreciated that. Because so many times you read a story and it's like, hey, folks, look at me. I'm writing a queer book.
Truly. And like, I mean, it's interesting because as like a queer creator, I feel like I'm consistently caught in the tension of wanting to like uphold and put the neon sign on like the queerness of something, while there's this like just as important tension also asking it to be commonplace and totally banal, right? And like almost expected. And so I kind of was hoping to achieve both with a story like this, where like from Ollie's point of view, he was born and raised on this island where it's really normative to
Mm-hmm.
have queer people, right? Like his piano tutor is this drag queen who also is a mayor, who also is the person who does like the story time at the local library, like, which is to me a really kind of very like queer ecology where everyone has like nine different jobs and we're kind of all helping each other put on a big show for one another. And that's based in reality, right? Like there are places that are like this,
Oh,
and
yeah.
queer communities tend to kind of create these sanctuaries even amongst larger ecologies. Like this particular island is based on Provincetown, Massachusetts, where
Okay.
you'll find almost like an exact replica of this particular story, um, or this particular setting, I should say.
I was going to
But
say,
at the same
what?
time, yeah,
Because
no,
I
not
haven't been
not
yet.
exactly. Don't worry. Yeah, you should go. It's still there. Don't worry. But Provincetown has this great history. It's been there for like hundreds of years,
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
always been kind of this like artistic commune and sanctuary. And but at the same time, places like this, even though from like the inside they are sanctuaries where it's very normative, they can't escape being embedded in a world that requires queer people to create sanctuaries. So they're always in dialogue with the tension that sort of asks us to kind of enclose ourselves into these communities. And so that's also what the story is about, right? Like the second things start to go awry on this island of Anchor's Mercy in the book, there's a quarantine imposed upon the island to kind of keep things locked down, but like even the act of kind of locking all these people into their suffering so they kind of have to deal with it themselves mimics in many ways how like institutions often leave and abandon marginalized communities to kind of deal with their problems themselves so they don't
Mm-hmm.
sort of spread into the rest of the world because it's seen as like a kind of societal contamination. And so the story kind of has both, where the actual setting is really very normative, but many of the strains that play out in this particular book absolutely arise from kind of the reality of communities and the sanctuaries that they create.
Yeah, and I love how, like you mentioned, one of the main characters is, besides being a very well respected member of the community, is also a drag performer, and I love that. I love that, because they're so respected, he can just go, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and everyone goes, yes, sir, and just
Hmm.
steps
Hmm.
into action. I love that. I also loved the idea of, when shit goes down, yes, these are drag queens, but they are also people who have like varying skill sets. And so those skill sets get to be put into practical use. That made me
Hmm.
smile. I'm like, yes, that's right. You would be able to do that, wouldn't you?
Well, it's true. I oftentimes people are like, well, how come you write queer horror, right? That's a question that I get all the time. And I've been lucky enough to kind of have a career where I've gotten to center characters like me and the people that I know. But it does beg the question of like, what am I doing? Sort of putting all of the my beloved people in versions of myself through like horrific scenarios. And the answer is really simple. I just don't think. straight people could cut it in certain scenarios because they don't have what it takes.
Right.
You would need certain skill sets to survive my books, and that's why, like, of course, there are straight people in these scenarios, right? But the main characters, they are often the people that have resilience and adaptability and diversity and elasticity. And they also care about their community, and they sort of understand that like surviving alone renders you very vulnerable in a crisis, but figuring out how to survive together, which is a huge theme of this book, very, very, very queer philosophy, very sort of marginalized philosophy. And that's the result of my own lived experiences. But I kind of I apologetically tell people that yeah, I just don't think a straight person has like the skill set or the bandwidth or the endurance to kind of make it through some of the stories because they are horror at the end of it.
Right. I've said that many times. It's like take your average run of the mill cishet, and if they had to be any one of us for 20 minutes, they'd be rocking back and forth in the corner.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I the way that I sometimes put this too is that like if I people ask me like what draws me to horror sometimes, and the answer is similar to this, where I'll sort of tell them that, like, well, yeah, I had a really beautiful childhood, right? Like, I had a really supportive family, and I was lucky in many, many ways. And I come from like a privileged background, in many ways, and underprivileged in others. But if I had to write the story of my childhood, my adolescence, my like teenage years down, I would have to shelve it in horror because despite the humor and the love and the compassion that I had the benefit of, um, the narrative of my life was dominated by knowing that I was vulnerable and that at any moment something could hurt me, something could come out of the blue, someone could turn on me, society could suddenly perceive me as a monster, and I would have no way of knowing, and I would have to just kind of deal with it and sort of figure out a way out in the moment. And those are that's like the major tenet of horror, right? Like the person sort of can sense that there's an oncoming monstrosity, but can't necessarily identify where until it's chasing them, like directly behind their back, trying to stab them. And so many queer people, I feel like, resonate with that, where they kind of have to hold those two things hand in hand, right? Like the joy and the fear of a lived experience. And I think that's why I'm drawn to scary stories that also have like a lot of humor and heart in them because it just feels much more real to me.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It's like that's very true. Not only are there threats out there at any given time, but they're looking for you.
They're looking for you. Like it's, in my books, at least the characters have a chance to kind of face off with the monsters, right? And I feel like so many people today like can sense like this encroaching, you know, retraction of society, right? That doesn't necessarily have a form. It doesn't have like a body, right? It's just something that we can sort of feel happening, which is, I think, why we turn to horror stories where the monster actually has a form that we can face and that we can
Right.
sort of either escape from or defend ourselves against or fight or even kill, right? Like, I think that's kind of why we like scary stories. But it's not surprising to me that, like, you know, now as the world has become much scarier, there's this huge influx of readers looking for a way to kind of deal with their feelings and read about them.
Right. Yeah, if you can name the monster, it makes it a little less scary. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Um I am a huge horror fan, so I definitely can understand what you're saying. And Martha is actively a non-horror fan. Like
Yeah.
she will straight up be like, "Ugh, not my genre. Get it away from me."
People always say that, and then a lot of the people that I talk to at like signings will be like, I don't like horror. I'm not a horror person. Like they've decided this about themselves, yet like they're like in front of me holding my book, being like, but I loved this. And I kind of let it go because I think people find their way through what they want as they need to. But it does always amuse me that people sort of decide that they don't like horror until they sort of find the one spooky thing that they really like, and then that's the exception.
Yeah, I always like when someone says they don't like horror. I try to respect that and not like force them to try. Except there's been a couple of times when I accidentally had Martha look at horror things, like things that I didn't think were horror. Like I thought, like, oh, this
Mm,
is fine, and then it got to the part, and then she was mad at me for like 2 weeks.
uh, Can't
Like,
be helped.
well, 10 Cloverfield Lane was a good example of that.
That is absolutely clearly a horror.
But see, the first like 89% of it is like this character study of these people
The
in the
people
situation.
locked in a bunker.
Yeah, but
That's what you're talking.
it's interesting. The performances are like dynamic and layered, and it's just like, but the last 10 minutes is what did it.
You know, I can really stoop down to see how you've seen it through. Like your logic is crazy, but I get what you're saying because I agree that like the reason that I love that movie is exactly what you're saying, but that is firmly in the I mean, especially because it's related to like Cloverfield, which is
Right.
like a great one of my favorite like horrors. So
Same. Well, and okay, so that ties us into your book, because I noticed there were several themes, horror themes in the book that I'm not going to say you outright reference, but you definitely nodded towards, and I appreciated that.
hmm
Like the literary version of the found footage film.
hmm
You know, there's
hmm
uh, sections of the book that are told through journals and letters. And that also gave me a little bit of like World War Z. You know, I appreciated that. One thing I definitely appreciated was that there were none of the main characters, like everyone was smart.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I hope so. I I wanted the three main characters. There's three kids sort of at the heart of the story. There's Ali, who I mentioned, then like Bash and Elisa. But I wanted them to have like, they're best friends, so they've sort of grown up on this island together. But I did want them to each have something really specific that they get to contribute. But they also have different points of view into like kind of how to solve problems, which causes a lot of tension. But I didn't want like I mean, oftentimes YA, especially with like teen casts, gets knocked for being like mostly angst and mostly miscommunications and like problems that adults like to claim that that they've grown out of, which is debatable.
Right.
But in my stories, I often like to find a way to test characters who are whip smart, who are really logical, and who are like highly emotionally intelligent, and they're still like fighting for their lives. Like that to me makes something feel a lot tenser because if you're reading this, you're not thinking, oh, I would never do this. You're thinking, well, it's probably exactly what I would do, and it's
Right.
still going wrong. Like that's kind of a better story to me.
Well, yeah, and the ones that aren't that smart or aren't that swift, those are the ones that get got. So
Right. And people do get got kind of consistently throughout the book. So don't fall in love with anyone for too long, is my advice.
right. Yeah, that was the other thing. You weren't afraid to like set us up to enjoy a character and then take them from us.
I got well, thank you. Thank you. But I got like a someone posted like a review recently, and this won't have any spoilers in it. Don't worry if you're thinking about reading the book out there. But
Yeah, I'm trying
they
really
they
hard
mentioned
to not spoil.
they mentioned like a character that doesn't make it to the end, and how like it felt pointless that this person sort of was there 1 second and then gone another. Not one of the main characters, but I was like thinking to myself, I was like, well, yeah, but that was kind of the point for me because in a crisis or in a disaster, like not every demise has like symbolic integrity, right? Like sometimes people die well before, they sort of get to crest in their use for like a narrative. And that's kind of the horror too, right? Like sometimes death is really swift and we don't see it coming. And it's not supposed to happen, but that's part of what makes something horrific. So it's interesting. Sometimes people have kind of a negative reaction to that, whereas I feel like that's kind of the point, at least sometimes. But yeah, I won't say more.
Right, that's the thing. It's like it's so much that I want to ask you, but it's like I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's all right. I know a lot of times my books are kind of hard to describe, so the recommendation is always like, I can't tell you anything about this, just like sit down and read it, which makes it very hard to like recommend to people because I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of suspense. I can't give you any details, but I can tell you like the cover's really pretty, and
Right.
a lot of people have sent me DMs of them crying. So if that sounds like something you would love to do, like go for it. But yeah, that's kind of it's like the catch 22 of trying to promote like a horror novel.
The cover is really pretty, and it kind of like gives you a clue of what's to come, but you don't realize it until you're in it. And then you're like, oh, and then you find yourself going back to the cover and looking at it as a reference for what you're imagining. Is that okay to say?
Hmm. Yeah, right. Well, books have covers for a reason. So judge the book by its cover. This
Right.
won't.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's just like, okay, you sent this to a graphic designer and this is what you get. Okay, great. But no, I love this. So, how much of yourself would you say is in these characters?
I mean, a lot. I feel like even as an adult, I feel pretty undefined in like some things I know about myself, right? Like I know who I am at like my core, but I also feel like the mutability of like changing over a lifetime is something that has been pretty inspiring. So a lot of my characters like definitely come from pieces of me. There's a ton of me in this book, but it's probably not where people think to look. Like for instance, like Ollie as a main character, we don't really have a similar life at all, aside from being gay, right? But the whole setting for the book, Anchor's Mercy, is inspired by going to Provincetown, in this case, Provincetown, Massachusetts, with my
Mm,
family every summer for like a week. And understanding as a result of that that there are communities full of queer people, and also at a certain point all these people that I'm seeing in the street, like they go home, they're out there in the world, like they go back to whatever flyover state they decided to leave in order to come here,
right.
which was amazing, right? This idea that like we can all come together and then sort of go back to our lives, and that there's queer people sort of everywhere as a result of this exchange. And so a lot of those feelings about like community and the respect that I have for the sanctuaries that like people who had it way worse than me still found the strength to create is like a huge part of like this particular story. But I don't know that like I can point to any singular character and tell you like, oh, this is a proxy for me. A lot of people have asked because the main character in this book, his mom, Gracie, is like such an important figure in the book. They've sort of insinuated that like, oh, is that based on your mom? And luckily no, because
Right.
Gracie, while she's like a great lovely character, and at the very beginning of the book there's a difficulty sort of between her and Ollie that like is sort of the central conflict between the two of them. Um, but um but her cancer diagnosis, which is like a huge part of like Ollie's motivation to solve the problems on his island, that's not something that I've like taken from my real life. But it is, and it kind of does wrap around my actual fear around like the mortality of my parents, which is a pretty big theme in the book. It's sort of understanding that your parents are people. They're
Right.
not just like, parents are not going to be there forever. They've had to make hard decisions in order to like defend you or protect you, right? Like those feelings are very much wrapped up in like this Gracie character. But I'm lucky enough to kind of like I still have my mom and I love her, and much of the love in this book is definitely from that relationship. But the fight that they're having at the beginning of the book that sort of spans the entire thing is not a personal fight that I have with my mom. So I always try to make sure that I that I defend my mom, because people think that I'm writing about her, but the fact of the matter is that she's a lovely lovely lady, and I wouldn't want people to mistake that.
Right. Yeah, because in real life, if Gracie was an actual person, I feel like she would be kind of insufferable.
Yeah, she definitely is. I mean, like, again, like another person who had like an early reaction to the book was like, I don't know why everyone's like loving this book. Like, I found the mom to be insufferable, which is the point. Like, the
Right.
Ollie starts the book by being like, I love my mom, like, especially when I hate her, right? Like,
Right.
she is totally a mess and I don't know what to do about it. Like, that's the major conflict between the two of them, is that she is recovering from the sickness, and as a result has sort of changed her attitude, her outlook towards life, like fundamentally. Like, she's unrecognizable as a result of this like crisis that she's just survived. And Ollie is sort of her caretaker, and it's fundamentally changed the nature of how they sort of interact. And he no longer has the right to feel sad about anything because everything should be good, should be positive, right? Like we've made it to the other side of this trauma. But Ali is like 17 and still sort of left with the inertia of almost watching a parent die and can't sort of shake this gloom that it's given him. And it's totally popped the bubble on his childhood, right? Like now he is almost like having to grow up against his will because of what he's witnessed and what he's survived, and now what he kind of knows about his island. So it's a pretty pivotal conflict between the two of them. And it's like the main driving force of his motivation in the book. So I'm not surprised when people are like, yeah, Gracie's kind of crazy. But I love her because I also, as an adult, can understand, the decisions that a parent might make. Um, to protect their child and to kind of shield them from a darker truth about like the existence of their home or something like that. So I feel like I understand Gracie, but I can't necessarily defend her because she does make some kind of bombastic decisions in the book.
Exactly. It's like you're doing too much, sis.
Yeah, totally. Like she would drive me up a wall.
Right.
So I understand why people are reacting that way, but
She
it
would
is the point.
she would be one of those people you would call every now and again because you want to get that woo 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 from someone, but then after like
Exactly.
about 15 minutes, like, well, gotta go. I gotta the dog's on fire. Gotta go.
Right. Yeah, it's the person that you call when you know that like something's going to interrupt the call in like 10 to 12 minutes,
Uh huh.
right? Like you can't get too far into it with them.
Because you call your friend and be like, okay, I'm going to call Gracie. So in 10 to 12
Right.
minutes, you need to
Right. You
call
call
me.
it's like
Something needs to be on fire.
there's certain people that I call when I'm on a walk between 2 points, right? Like I'm on my way to like the grocery store, so that I'm like, oh well, I'm outside I got to go in.
Right.
But it's a good little catch up
Hmm.
and then you call someone else on the walk back.
Right. Exactly. It's going to sound like I'm hanging up on you, but.
Yeah, exactly.
So I gotta say that the horror themes in this book, like the actual threat, is not something that I've ever really seen before.
Really?
Yeah, it's because I was thinking about, I'm like, I've read a lot and seen a lot of like quote unquote zombie stories, I
Hmm.
guess, and monster stories. But this one has a specific twist on it, like I guess I can like a nautical twist, I guess we'll say for,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's not something, I mean, and that just could be a testament to the things that I've consumed. But yeah, it's something that I've not really encountered before. Like, is this a theme, an element that you are already familiar with, or did they just like pop it out of your head?
So if I mean, again, if anyone is looking at the cover, it's kind of clear, kind of what we're chatting about. We're talking about sort of the organism that washes ashore from the deep ocean and starts to kind of not manifest, but like spread itself, metastasize, I should say, through like this community
Good
is
words, yeah.
definitely like marine in nature, and it's because I wanted to write about. I mean, there's a few different reasons for this. There's the just physical revulsion that I have to the idea of like coral or barnacles being able to like grow on human skin, which it can't. So please, anyone out there who's like shivering, don't worry. Like this is not possible. But I do love the idea of like a marine ecosystem kind of being an act like a threat, right? And coral is colonial in nature, so it has to exist in these like large colonies because each little polyp of coral is an individual organism, but they live in sort of these large reefs, right? And I wanted to sort of write a monster that was beautiful, that you'd never suspect of horror, but the second that something like that can grow on you, can
Hmm.
spread between like people and flesh, like that's much scarier. And I love reveling in sort of taking something light and beautiful and ornamental and sort of turning it into a force of fear. A lot of my books sort of aim at that particular like inversion, but also the sort of the metaphor behind it for me was that Ali is this like completely isolated kid at the start of the book, and he's turned his back on his island, his best friends, to some degree, like his own mom, like because that's where the fight sort of is located for him at the start of the book. Uh, And then the force that he's up against for the rest of the book and then the book after is this organism that, against your will sort of merge you into a much larger system. It'll sort of lock you into a colonial community, right? Like it'll bring you into itself, and now you're part of something, but you're part of it forever, right? You've sort of given up your individuality, your humanity, and you're brought into kind of this like smothering enforced community because it's a reef. And it's an organism kind of trying to build itself out and merge people together. And there's a moment in the book where Ollie is about to get sort of like fused into this monstrosity. And he even thinks, is this really as bad as I think it is? Like, is the fear that I have around this, genuine, or would it be so bad to sort of be brought into a community, an embrace that I can never escape? Like, is it okay to kind of give up right in this moment? There are fates worse than death, but maybe this is slightly better than death.
Right.
And I wanted something to kind of test him. In part because when we see zombies and when we see sort of like the way that they're like typically depicted in media, right? Like they're sort of these like mindless, rabid, animalistic things falling after you, or they're like a shambling corpse, like there's nothing sort of within them anymore. They're just kind of like an automated threat.
Right.
Um, but I wanted to kind of create a version of them that still retain their humanity, that still sort of like look like people, but kind of have this like enhancement to them. And instead of them being rabid and scary, they're tearful and they're laughing and they're smiling and they're singing. And there's a sort of undeniable joy to the way that they're sort of infected, which just makes me so uncomfortable, right? This idea that like there could be a pleasure in giving up.
Mm.
That's a really seductive thing that I think a lot of people, are uncomfortable with. And so those are the few pieces that kind of fuse together to form like they're called weepers in the book, if anyone's wondering.
Yes.
But that's where they come from.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like usually with zombies, once you become one, you're not you anymore. So
Hmm.
it becomes easier to, I guess, like you get over the initial loss, like, oh no, they got XYZ. And then you got to like fight them, just double tap to the head and it's over. But when
Right.
they're still in
We'll tap to
there,
the head. Yeah.
when they're still in there, that's what's scary.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a much, well, okay. So if we're really getting to kind of like the queer discussion here, a big part of like, the onus that I sort of put on myself as like a creator who announces to the world that like I write queer horror, right? Is that like the queerness, my queer perspective doesn't just sort of shed itself when it's convenient. So when I'm picking up the theme of zombies, I'm also looking at like how queer communities have historically dealt with contagion. How
Yes.
have we tried to protect each other, right, from something spreading amongst ourselves? And we have a history of this. Like we know from historical records and the survivors of like the AIDS epidemic what it was
Yes.
like to sort of be within these communities and to sort of sense something spreading and to try to raise the alarm on it and to be completely ignored and to be abandoned and to basically have to solve these things ourselves, to create structures ourselves. And so while this book is not necessarily about the AIDS epidemic, it does take place in a world that has endured that. And the sanctuary in the book is a result of that. And it's clear that these people, the elders in this community, have systems and measures to take it sort of against something similar happening. So they try to shut the town down. They go to the drag queens and they sort of spread through the drag network that like something has been happening to people. They try to keep people home, but in the end, it fails because of a bunch of straight people, a bunch of bachelorettes who
I love
who
that.
decide that, right, like they have to have their night out. They have to have their karaoke. It's my bachelorette party. And
Uh
so they
huh.
defy the stay-at-home order. And it's because of this entitlement
Uh
of
huh.
these cultural tourists that
Uh
kind of
huh.
come in, are not part of the community, but absolutely feel entitled to like the entertainment of it, that this island is absolutely devastated by, this infection. And that's that's not just that's commentary. It's not a metaphor whatsoever. It's outright critique. And then on the other side of it, the other thing that I wanted to say about this is that like in also dealing with an infection that sort of spreads rapidly, that monstrifies humans, I wanted the main character Ollie to figure out that the people who are infected are not necessarily a foregone conclusion. They don't just turn into this force of evil. They're still humans. They're still in there. Because I wanted to talk about the fact that like our gut reaction to seeing infections spreading in our community like might be stigma and disdain,
Right.
but, perhaps if we listened to these people, the ones, the actual victims of what's happening, not the people trying to sort of save themselves, but the actual people who are sort of undergoing this transformation or the degradation of their health, like we could learn something and that actually could lead to the salvation of everybody. And so, not once does AIDS come up in this book, not once, but it's absolutely sort of built into the marrow of how these characters fight against this, like the decisions that they get to make, and also like the type of hope that ends up saving them.
Yeah, hell yeah. I made that parallel pretty quickly. And I can hear Martha, like when we talk about COVID, she'll be the first one to say, "This is not our first pandemic,"
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And you can tell like who learned something and who didn't, you know?
exactly. And I mean, I remember specifically one of the main things that inspired this book is when the Delta variant was coming out, right?
Right.
During like the sort of the summer after the lockdown, and like the Delta variant was sort of the first big variant that was hitting the headlines, and it was sort of this like, oh my God, we thought we were sort of through this, but now here we are. There's variants, like, oh my God,
Right. Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
remember this.
It's
And it was
mutating.
blamed on
Ah!
right, exactly, right. Like, oh no. And it was sort of the moment that we realized that, like, oh my gosh, like this is maybe never ending. And that variant, the Delta variant, it was named and caught because in Provincetown, enough gay people exhibited health seeking behaviors to get themselves tested that we were able to sort of figure out that, oh, this thing is mutating. But as a result of it, the Delta variant was blamed on the people of Provincetown and the people that were getting tested. But it's just because of a health seeking behavior, right? And we as queer people often are told that we have a risky lifestyle. But the fact of the matter is that we often are like very cautious and very protective and we seek out solutions. And the irony is that we then get saddled with the blame for sort of raising the flag on something
Right.
that affects everybody. That variant was in every little beachy community that was shirking their COVID guidelines that summer, and it was everywhere. But we just happened to catch it, but then we
Right.
got blamed for it. And I wanted to sort of discuss what it's like to sort of be the people like raising your flag about something and then having to sort of own it as a result of it.
Yeah, that's a common, unfortunately, a common theme. If you point out the thing that makes you the thing,
Hmm.
like,
Exactly.
for instance, if I'm going, that's racist. Well, that's racism.
Right.
I'm a racist
Exactly.
for
Yeah.
pointing out racism.
Right. Yeah. Suddenly race matters only to you.
How do
Right.
that work?
And
Right.
hmm hmm
Yeah.
no, it's insane. And I think that it's something that like anybody in our community, especially people with like intersectional identities, like we know this, we've sort of had to endure this. And then oftentimes the behavior as a result of it is like, I'm going to step out. I'm going to step back, right? I'm going to sort of abandon my position in this particular fight, which I understand. I totally understand the weirdness around that, but I want to sort of offer some alternatives.
Right. And, you can't pull back but so much because if everyone pulls back, then it's coming for you, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, we have to. The main like motto that the kids in this book have are the three main characters because they were born and raised together, and everyone in their community calls them the Suds because they stick together, right? Like they're like these like they're always together, right?
I love their
And
dynamic.
there's thank you. And they're slippery, right? Like they're always causing mischief, but they're always getting away with it, right? Which then becomes really important when suddenly like the Navy puts the island on quarantine, tells everyone to sort of like lock up, and like these kids have to kind of slip through these gaps to figure out how to kind of travel and figure out what's going on. And so, but their motto is Suds stick together, and even when it's like these kids are fighting the entire book, they're at each other's throats, right? Like they're not holding back about the big feelings they have about each other, about what's going on. Like they're having real discussions about this. In part because it just annoys me when characters like don't speak up for themselves. And so I have
Right.
now three kids that are constantly yapping and fighting with one another, but they still stick together. They find a way to sort of prioritize the togetherness, the surviving together part of it, which I think is ultimately why they're compelling, at least for me as a writer, right? Like they understand that surviving individually is ultimately not worth it. Like if you are the last lone survivor of something, like you really haven't lived. You really are not surviving anything. Like you're just the only victim left
Right.
of something. But if you can find a way to kind of bring everyone with you to survive all together, like that's worth it. That's worthy of hope.
Right. That's growth fighting back, basically.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally think so.
Yeah, I love the dynamic of the Suds. It's like they're best friends, and then there's like a, well, not a love triangle, but not going
Yeah, there's
on.
some flirtations. Yes.
Yeah, and it's just
It
like,
used to be, oh my God, it used to be more pronounced. I ended up taking it out, but there used to be a little bit more I don't want to say romance, 'cause, again, these are like teens, but
right.
there was a little bit more of like a heavy-handed sort of like triangle between three of them that ended up being cut for time, but in the HBO adaptation, I'll make sure we put it back in.
Right. Yeah, it's there. I felt it. Because
Good.
like some things are actually said, and then other things are like you wouldn't get that angry if you didn't have
Hmm.
certain feelings.
Totally.
I
Yes.
see you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely loved the element of the bachelorette party being the moment that fucked it up for everyone because
Hmm.
much as in life.
Yeah, that's not fiction. I mean, that's truly not. I mean,
Hmm.
the thing is, though, I don't know. Like, I'm friends with a lot of drag queens, and they can't necessarily speak ill about the bachelorettes because
Money.
bachelorettes have money, right? They
Right.
they bring in like an infusion of tourism that like we kind of need in order to provide what we need for like the rest of our community in those spaces. And so I like the idea of like a necessary evil being part
Yeah.
of this particular world. That's how I think about them. But even when you go to these places, right? Like Provincetown or like if you go to like gay bars and stuff, like even the physical invasion of a bachelorette party, like all of these people dressed identical. And I'm talking about like the straight bachelorette parties because
Well,
I've
yeah.
seen plenty of lesbian bachelorette parties roll up and they look fantastic.
Right.
And I'm glad that they're there, but I'm talking about the like like the Savannah girls and like they'd probably be a little bit more at home in like Nashville,
Right.
but they've decided to come to like this gay bar and
The woo
they
girls, I
sure
call
show
them.
the woo girls, right? And like there is this sense of like invasion about them and the
Uh-huh.
way that they look and it kind of feels fungal, right? To see all these people in like their like
Fungal.
pink fuzzy shirts with their tiaras. Like
Not
I'm scared
fungal.
that I'm gonna like I'm scared that I'm gonna like leave the bar and find like a feather boa like snaking around my neck, right?
Right.
Like it feels contagious.
All of a sudden, the only thing you that will sustain you is rosé.
Right, I know, and I need to cry off my mascara twice in one night, but then reapply it in the bathroom and be like built back up by my girls, right? Like I do feel a tender thing for these bachelor parties, but I wanted to write about that particular like entitlement and how it can sometimes spell disaster for a place.
Yeah, I'm getting a little PTSD from moments in certain gay bars, and here they come. It's
I know. I know. I mean, the thing is, like, it's very funny watching the reaction of the book because all the queer people, the second these girls show up, are like, oh God, like,
uh-huh.
I know what's going to happen. Everybody else is like, I thought that was really creative. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take the points from either party in this. I'll say, yes, thank you. It was so creative of me. But it's like, it's also, I feel like it's kind of a common, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a common threat.
yeah, exactly. Uh, like I'm thinking about so one of our favorite bars. in its old configuration. There's like the piano was here, and then there's like the little
Hmm.
princess bar here. And one girl, she's leaning over the princess bar, which is unmanned at this particular night. And she's like reaching and grabbing bottles and pouring herself a drink, and then being surprised when she got kicked out.
Shocked. Shocked. Yeah, I'm sure.
And it's like, you don't do this kind of shit on your home turf. What makes you think this is going to fly here?
Well, because gay people are fabulous, and I thought gay people were fun, and like I thought that they loved women, right? Like
Uh-huh.
these are the psycho. This is the psychosis that leads people to kind of helping themselves.
It's all about me, and everyone will just flock to Chaw.
It's my
Chaw.
special day. I know, and there's something very like insidious about, especially with like gay rights and like marriage being sort of back in a contested territory, about like
Say
women
it.
queuing up for their like heterosexual wedding
Uh-huh.
and coming into like our spaces to sort of like
Uh-huh.
flaunt, right? With zero and then the second there's like the most minor of repercussion, like the second that someone's not smiling and wooing at them,
Uh-huh.
it's like World War III, right? Like the devastation that
Uh-huh.
could occur
Uh-huh.
is there's such an irony to that I think goes sort of unnoticed by these people when they feel like, why wouldn't you want me here? And I'm like, well, maybe the people who have been fighting for like the right to marry one another for like years and years and years and years and years feel a little bit disregarded when the sanctuary that they've built for themselves and the people like them is invaded by someone who is here like as a mascot of like heterosexual union. I don't
Right.
know. Maybe think about it for like 2 seconds.
You're the reason why this place exists in the first place, honey.
Right? Exactly. And yet here you are, and you want to sing karaoke, and you want to sing the 12-minute version of It's All Coming Back to Me Now by Celine Dion. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and you want us to listen and give you dollars? Like,
Right.
that's crazy.
Right.
But okay, sure. Get on up there, girl.
I saw this guy propose to his girlfriend in the middle of a drag show. Yeah. I
Well,
if it wasn't for the fact that I was enjoying my drink, I'd have thrown it.
I know. Mazel to them, I guess.
Right.
Couldn't find a better time, but they had to do it then.
Right. I'm glad she said yes, because y'all deserve each other, child.
Right, right.
Oh my God.
Congratulations.
Can you tell I have feelings?
I will, like, I think a lot of people have feelings about this, but I feel like a lot of them can't necessarily be expressed because these are feelings that make the most sense in person, like in these spaces,
Right.
and like exhibited by people who have been in these spaces for like a long time. But so much of queer culture now is just bickering on the internet.
Mm.
And
Mm.
like for me, being queer has always been a verb, right? Like it's how I go through the world. It's the nightlife that I get to enjoy, but it's also like everything else about my day to day. Because I'm like a visibly queer. Not, I mean, not. I'm in like a tank top and a hat right now, but like typically out in the world, like I'm very flamboyant, right? So I can't really even escape it or step out of it. But that's really different than like the putting on of like a rhetoric to like debate and nitpick one another on the
Right.
internet. So like I know in past times when like the bachelorette party has come up, like people will swoop in and be like, well, how do you know the sexuality of every girl in that bachelorette party? Or how do you know like that maybe they're there because they feel like they wouldn't be safe in like a straight place. And so they're going to like a gay place because they're protected from misogyny, right? And I'm like, okay, so now we have like a fictional bachelorette party that is like full of full of diversity, secret hidden diversity that
Uh-huh.
I now need to consider
Uh-huh.
in my discomfort in like that equation of like my actual life, right? Like I suddenly no longer have a right to just having a reaction, right? Like you with your drink, looking at a proposal, because I now have to calculate into my mental calculus every single disqualification that could come up on
Uh-huh.
like a Twitter thread, right? Like, is that useful? I don't know, because it seems like maybe it's not that useful to do math that way,
Right.
but that's kind of what happens sometimes.
Well, Martha and I have had this discussion a lot. We're going to get back to the book, but we're sidebarring right now.
Yeah, sorry guys.
No, that's okay. Our listeners are used to it. So,
Yeah.
like, the fact that in really just one generation, we have this group of queer kids who have always had rights, have always had that sense of self, that ability to be themselves. And so, since they hadn't had to go through nothing, all they have is navel gazing on the internet.
Yeah.
So, as annoying as that is, it's like we should be proud of that.
Yes. Oh my God. I'm so glad that that's how you turn this because that's how I feel too. I'm like almost this like the naivety. I think it's like something that I kind of cherish because I'm like, oh, the only reason that you're acting so annoying about this is because you can, right? Because you haven't had to kind of go through all of these things. And so I'm like, this is actually so there's a getting, oh, here's our connection back to the book. So in the book,
Thank you for that.
Ollie is a character who sort of always had, yeah, I'm like, back to me. Um, Ollie sort of always had the benefit of the supportive community, and he doesn't necessarily know what it would be like to turn his back on it, right? Like, because it's a decision that he doesn't even really mean to make. And it's only because of like the darkness of like his mom's sickness and that experience that he kind of feels uncomfortable in this. But his mom understands, like, no, 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 like you're gonna need these people. You're gonna need all of this, like once I'm gone. But the fact that like, you can sort of come and go as you please, that you don't feel desperate urgency to maintain contact with like this queer island, like in a way is a byproduct of a world sort of slowly accepting people and those barriers of sanctuary becoming porous as a result of it, right?
Mm,
That no longer needs to sort of be strict. And so that's more of a discussion that it ends up in the second book, the one that I just turned in, so the sequel to The Dead of Summer. There's a clear sort of moment where in a drag queen actually tries to sort of have a conversation with a character and is like, I know my decisions and the things that I had to do in order to like save myself back in like the 80s and the 90s, like they're not going to make sense to you, but I almost love that they don't because it means that you as a person are so far removed from the hard decisions that like basically your ancestors had to make to give you this moment in time right now. And in the context of their conversation, it then turns into, but now you have to understand that you, as someone who is in a crisis, you are the ancestor of whoever is going to, come generations after. And you need to now make decisions, for the welfare of a community that's going to outlive you, right? Because
mm,
that's what it means to be an elder in a community. And we don't often have a vocabulary in the queer community of lineage or inheritance or elders or ancestors because of, the divorce that like the AIDS epidemic has sort of caused. And I think now I love that I get to be an elder in the queer community, right? Like
right.
I'm like 30, I'm 34, so I'm not actually like that old yet, but
Bitch.
like, but you know what I mean though?
I
Like,
do.
but I look forward to being
I'm still going to
like,
side eye you, though, with your elder.
that's fine. That's fine. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that like I look forward to sort of being, able to kind of make decisions that are for some kid in the far distant future who will
Right.
never know who I am, but gets to sort of sit in comfort that I've afforded them in sort of the actions that I get, in the choices that I get to make, like right now with like whatever platform I have. So I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about a lot of feelings about like queer communities and sort of how they build each other over time.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting, and it's like I said, they hadn't had to go through anything, and cut to now. It's like
Yeah. Well, now we are all going through something, right?
right, and so like these kids that have had nothing to do but navel gaze are also the ones that are some of the fiercest activists. It's
Hmm.
like they scare me. I'm like, yes, go point them in that direction. Get them, and I love
Yeah,
that too.
it's true.
We can
Yeah.
create both of those things at the same time in the same generation.
I know. My greatest hope is that, like, the infighting that we subject to one another to, like, we find a way to kind of unify and focus on something. And unfortunately, threats to the community tend to kind of be the unifying force, right? Like a
Right,
common enemy,
right.
is often what you need to kind of get out of each other's faces when, but having these little squabbles sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. But I agree. I'm like a lot of the ways that we sort of treat each other on the internet seem to be more about like policing one another than they do about like preserving, sort of a larger entity. And so I kind of wonder when that shift will happen, especially now that like real threats have started to become like way more common.
Exactly. It's like now that you've got your claws sharpened, Mary, how about you use them over there? You know?
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, I'm also just like, people got to get offline. They really do. They
Log
need
off
to
and touch
come
grass.
and I don't like leave the grass out of it. I don't even care about the grass. I'm like, you need to get offline and you need to like find your local YMCA and see if you can volunteer there, right? Like you need
Yes.
to show up at your school board meetings and sit tight. And the moment that they put a queer book on the stand for being banned, like you got to stand up for that, right? Like
Right.
there are real world moments that are way more impactful than sort of like sitting and like nitpicking each other on the internet. And at this point, like the way that algorithms work, like those conversations are self-enclosed and they're kind of bubbled up and they're not necessarily bleeding out to sort of make or exert any pressure on people who are like against LGBTQIA rights. And those people, the ones that are trying to take away our rights, like they're not doing it on Twitter, they're doing it in the courts.
Thank
They're
you.
doing it in real world scenarios, which is unfortunately kind of where we need to show up too. So if the only way you know how to fight is through a keyboard and online and with each other, you're very much in the way when it comes to having to actually take the fight like into like a real world setting.
Right.
But I hope that people sort of forge their way back towards their local communities as a result of this. Like that can only really lead to good. Getting to know like the problems in your area, right? The problems that are going to affect you. Like that's a good vocabulary to have as an activist.
Right. It's like you have the intelligence, you have the vocabulary, Lord knows, you have
You
the
got it. Yeah.
energy. Take that and
Hmm.
take it from the theoretical, which is what the internet is, and put it into
Hmm.
practical application. Because without practical application, like theory means nothing.
Right. Yeah. And it's dire, right? Like it's now or never, truly.
Literally, yeah.
Book bans come up a lot, especially with me because I've had books that have been challenged only because of the like my queerness as a creator or like the inherent queerness of like the characters, but not ever because of anything content wise in the books. Like often they'll be challenged because of like sexual content, right? And there's my books are horror. The characters don't have time for a lot of making out,
Right.
right? They're running for their lives half the time. And so my books also end up being put back on shelves quite often, but only after they've gone through like an arduous review that has, of course, caused some poor librarian or bookseller like a ton of pain. And so people ask though as a result, like, well, what can we do? And showing up in your actual like the fabric of your actual community like at your bookstores in the school meetings
Yes.
it ends up being really meaningful because it only takes one voice to sort of like cause a book to receive a lot of backlash, right? Like one lone shut in is like, I think that this book is teaching children wrong lessons, right? And suddenly that book has to be pulled into review and pulled off shelves and it's creating all this paperwork, right? Like who knows if it'll make it back onto the shelf, right? If it's causing all this trouble. But if there are voices that are already in the room that are absolutely like, actually, like, I disagree, or I'm going to advocate on behalf of this thing before it gets challenged, right? Like, that ends up being really meaningful. And it gives support to the people in the community that end up having to have this fight. Like, the fight is not from me, the author. I get to kind of sit back and keep writing. The fight for book bans, for instance, is often left with like the librarians and the teachers that they can't leave. They're embedded in the community. They have
Right.
to have that conversation with that patron or that parent. So lending them your support, way more meaningful. And of course, like, I love your support too. If you're listening to this, like I too appreciate the kudos. But just like you said, like like I'm the theory of all this, but the physical, the actual like practical application, like that
Right.
happens sort of outside of my books, right? And it happens like on the shelves where they're put.
And unfortunately, that's the thing. It's usually just one or two loud mouths that cause the
Yeah.
kerfuffle. And Martha and I have both said this many times. Like before you open your mouth to say this book needs to be banned, you need to submit at least a 10-page book report on that book to prove that you've read it.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely.
Because so many times it's like you barely made it through the dust jacket, boo. I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you made it through like, oh my God, someone in someone challenged one of my books, The Honeys, which came out 2 years ago or 3 years ago at this point, and they were like, this book promotes killing your family members. Like that was the big crime that I had submitted or that I had committed as like the author of this book. And like I think about that because that's such a crazy interpretation of what happened in the book, which is on page 6, the main character is attacked by their sister who's like in a crazy fugue state. And in the ensuing fight, the sister ends up perishing. And it's not a plot twist. It's like the absolute like plot of the book. It's the thing that sort of launches the rest of the book. And the whole rest of the book is the guilt around like what's happened to this character and investigating their life and sort of trying to understand like why they went crazy, right? Like and clearly, if an entire book is sort of written around the regret of something, the book itself is not trying to tell people do this,
Right.
right? Like, if that happens on page 6, in the ensuing 394 pages of a 400-page book are dealing with the outcome of that, it simply cannot be a promotional tool for homicide.
Right.
But people read like 10 words and then
Right.
they're like, "Ah, I got it." And if you're reading a horror novel where horrific things happen, like and you have no media literacy or no willingness to interrogate the text because you're just trying to, hurt an author or a community, then
Right.
it's really, really easy. So that's why I try to tell people, like, especially with like queer stories, diverse stories, standing up for these things and sort of being in the room to kind of counter these particular debates is very valuable.
Nice. So, what is the last horror book or movie that scared you?
Ooh, I watched the movie Bring Her Back a few months ago, and there are still scenes that I sometimes flash back to and like physically wince. That
Mm,
was a really hard watch. I also loved Weapons,
I haven't seen
more
that
recently
yet.
than that. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun, but I think part of the fun was seeing it in like a theater full of people like screaming. So I don't know, like I would say you should see it, but I think part of why I loved it was that particular experience. I love that experience.
Yeah.
As for books, I'm reading The Deep right now by I think Nick Cutter, I want to say. I've only just begun it, but if people really like my book, The Dead of Summer, we've talked about like a little bit, then I would say check out Our Wives Under the Sea or They Bloom at Night are both sort of in the world of like marine transformative, like horror, like science thrillers.
Nice.
That's my recommendation.
So, if we wanted to get our own copy of The Dead of Summer, where is your favorite place to point people to purchase it?
I try to tell people to, because reading is on decline. So long as you're getting books, like thumbs up for me. But if you want, and if I can sort of invade your shopping habits, buying from your local independent bookstore is always something that's going to be worthwhile because you're going to make connections with booksellers who are going to learn what you like, and then they're going to tell you about something that you're going to love. So finding that in your own community, a great thing to do. My local indie that I adore is Books of Wonder in New York City. I
Mm,
sign stock there all the time. So anytime I'm in there, they have a big stack of books for me to sign. So if you want a signed copy of one of my books, they tend to have them. But yeah, Books of Wonder, they ship all over the place. So they got a website. You can check them out.
okay, wonderful. And I'll make sure to be definitely push, because this is a fabulous book. If we wanted to find out more about you, Ryan, where would we go?
My email, no, my God, my email. Don't email me. my my website, which does have a contact form, yeah, good. Which does have a contact form, is ryanlasala.com. So very simple, but I'm on TikTok and Instagram and Threads right now as the Ryan La Scala.
Okay. And we will put that information in the notes to this episode. The book is The Dead of Summer, and the fabulous author is Ryan La Scala. Ryan, thank you so much for spending time with us at the Full Circle table. The book is great. It really is. I can't say enough good things about it. I read it so quickly, and like whenever I had to stop, I was mad.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
so
you. I
much.
really appreciate that. And thank you for this was such a lovely conversation. I'm really glad that I got to meet you. And if I ever come back, would be great to meet Martha.
I was going to say, I have a feeling this will not be the last time we sit and chat. And I'll have to give her the Cliff's Notes versions because, like I said, not a horror fan.
Right, that's all right. She missed a good conversation, but maybe we'll find a way to convert her.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries. All names, pictures, music, audio, and video clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.